It's commonly known that in Sweden, you pay high taxes. So in today's video, I wanted to talk a little bit about what benefits do you get from paying these high taxes here in Sweden. I think it's quite a lot you get, but let's see if it's worth moving to Sweden despite paying so many taxes here. Let's start with universal healthcare. Citizens and legal residents have access to this universal healthcare system, which is led by the government, but then you also have the municipalities who take care of each region and therefore have the greatest influence. How it works here in Sweden, you actually need a personnummer. I mentioned that in my previous videos quite a few times. It's kind of a Swedish tax identification number. When you move to Sweden, you normally apply for this number, or if you're born here, you get automatically a personnummer. If you just come here for a short period of time, then normally you would take your insurance you have in your home country and extend it for abroad. So is the universal healthcare free in Sweden? The answer is no, but it is quite cheap, quite affordable. And that's because you do pay taxes. So normally per visit to the doctor, you pay around 110 to 220 SEK, which is about $10 to $20. It depends where you're going in Sweden, which municipality. And if you visit a specialist, you pay up to 400 SEK, which is about $40. And if you have to stay in the hospital, you pay around 120 SEK per day. But if you are 20 or under, you don't pay anything. But also, if you, for example, have like a real issue and you have to go to the doctor many times, there is a cap, so you don't have to always pay. When you reach 1,200 SEK, which is about $115, then you don't have to pay anymore for the year. So that is quite a good thing. And I feel like that's quite cheap. If you just have to pay 1,200 in total, if you're really sick and you have to go many times during the year, you don't have to pay beyond 1,200 SEK, $115. So I think that sounds really good. There is a little bit of a disadvantage with the system because it is quite cheap. The waiting times can be quite significant. Sometimes you have to wait for an appointment 3 to 90 days, depending on what you have, if it's an emergency or not. And if you want to visit a specialist, this could also take up to 3 months waiting time, which is obviously not ideal and it can be quite frustrating. However, there is private insurance here you can take up as well, and that normally reduces the waiting time. But the majority of people use the universal healthcare system and don't pay extra. So it's not a thing to have private insurance here, but some people do have it. I have one video where I talked a little bit about a negative experience where I had to wait quite a long time in the emergency room with my daughter who had a fever. She was 3 months at the time. But since then, I have to say I made good experience with the Swedish healthcare system. I had a few appointments. I didn't have to wait too long. Also for my child, I had to make an appointment and got an appointment the same day. It wasn't like an emergency thing, but I still was seen the same day. So that I thought was quite good. So it can go the other way as well. Like it doesn't always have to be like the waiting times are crazy. But yeah, you do get the universal healthcare by paying taxes here. So you just pay a little and then the rest is covered by the government. What else do you get from paying high taxes here in Sweden? You get a generous social welfare here. Of course, this doesn't have to always apply to everyone, but you never know what happens in life. You might be absolutely okay just working here, but if you need at some point the support, then you can get it. And Sweden is just a really good country for it. It especially takes care or supports the elderly, the disabled, and the unemployed, but also families with children. Just to give you an example, when it comes to families with children, for example, the government pays for sick leave when your child is sick. I'm pretty sure you don't have that in the UK or in Germany. That basically means when your child gets sick, you can stay at home with the child, look after the child, and in turn you get paid by the government for you staying away from work. So normally you maybe have to take a holiday or something like that to look after your child, or try to find someone else to look after your child. But yeah, in Sweden, you do get paid for looking after your child when the child is sick. I actually was asked the other day if Sweden is a good country for single mothers, because that can be quite tricky not to have like two incomes or the support from the father. Obviously, this is required normally that the father pays, but there's also other financial support from the government depending on your income, I think. And that means this includes financial assistance in housing or food or other basic needs depending on really what your situation is. And there are other benefits for single mothers or parents in general, which I will mention throughout this video here as well. I think it's just a very good feeling to know that there's a support system in place if anything happens to you, if you get unemployed or if you get sick. There's really structure here and financial support here as well. So yeah, you do pay high taxes here in Sweden, but this area is basically covered by those taxes you pay. And then I want to talk about parental leave. I think the Nordics and especially Sweden is quite famous for their parental leave. It is often mentioned as the ideal system when it comes to parental leave. And what it means is, like, as a parent, a single mother or parents, you get 480 days for your child. That means paid days from the government. 390 days is based on sick leave pay, and the other 90 days is a minimum pay you have here in Sweden. Of course, I don't want to go into super details here about the parental leave, but there is an institution called Försäkringskassan, and they're very informative. You can call them up and ask them anything you want, and there's also a website with lots of information on it, so it's quite well explained. But what is also quite significant for Sweden is that 90 days out of those 480 days are allocated to one or each parent. That means they can't be transferred. So that also means normally maybe the mother takes the majority of parental leave, but the dad has to take these 90 days, otherwise they're basically lost. And that means they have to look after the child, they can bond with the child. I think this rule is actually quite cool. Of course, this requires you having children here in Sweden, so that just applies to parents. But I think if you do have a family, then Sweden might be a good place for you to move here. And then I also want to talk about free education. I know I mentioned free education a few times in my videos, and people were pointing out that it's not really free because the taxpayers pay for it. And that's true. In those high taxes you pay here in Sweden, free education is part of it, but I feel like you really have to digest what it means, because it can be quite a difference to other countries and quite a big benefit. Definitely when I compare this to the UK, it already starts with a preschool, which here you do pay for it based on your income, but the maximum I think you pay is 1,500 SEK, which is around $144 a month, and that is a full-time place in kindergarten. I remember when I sent my child to kindergarten in the UK, in London, I pretty much paid almost $144 a day. Then you have the schools, of course, and I know in many countries school is free, which is also amazing, you know, but you have some benefits here as well, which is like free lunch, for example, which in the UK that's quite a big struggle, especially for low-income households. And then when we look further and it comes to university, that is here free in Sweden as well. And I feel that is quite rare. Even in Germany, you pay a little bit towards your education, and it also depends what you study probably. Not to talk about the US or UK, which is so expensive, so expensive. So that is definitely no comparison to Sweden, where the university education is free. But it's not only free, there is a focus on education here in Sweden. So it's a very high quality education you get here. The government is really putting funds into universities to make sure that the standard of learning and education is high compared to other countries. So just thinking about my children, it's such a relief. I don't have to pay a huge amount for preschool, and then they go to school. Even private schools here in Sweden work differently than in other countries. The system of private schools is a little bit different. It's privately owned, but it's still regulated, and it's actually free for the parents. So private schools and public schools are both free here in Sweden. I mean, that's something I learned much later when I was talking to friends about it. And now I'm also looking into schools for my older child, because next year I think, she will go to school, to elementary school. So I'm just looking what's out there to get the feel of, how does Sweden work with education. And I hope that my children will also go to university here if they decide to go to university, because it's free and the standard is really good. So knowing this, that it is actually worth paying high taxes to know that our children are taken care of, I think that's a good feeling and definitely a plus for Sweden. And last but not least, Sweden provides a high standard of living and quality of life. What does it mean? It means that definitely the things we discussed here in this video are part of it, but then also there is a great job market out there, opportunities, tech companies, startups, entrepreneurship, a lot of possibilities here in Sweden. Of course, not everything is great, but the opportunity is definitely here in Sweden, and especially in Stockholm and other cities in Sweden. Also, Sweden is quite safe. I know there's a little bit of debate with those gangs going around and shootings happening in Sweden, and it's true. I talked about this in other videos as well. But in general, when I look at the statistics, Sweden is still one of the safest European countries you can think of. And then it's also economically quite stable. There's a low unemployment rate, also relatively low poverty rate, and a high life expectancy. And maybe I said that already a little bit, but it's a modern country and technology is quite at the forefront. I haven't really paid cash, for example, since I moved here, and I live here already more than 1.5 years. If I look at Germany, it's definitely behind a lot. But that's just one aspect here in Sweden, which adds to the quality of life, I feel. And there's a focus on sustainability, gender equality, and they're also committed to the climate goals. And not to mention nature. A lot of nature is very important to Swedes, to Sweden, to preserve nature, to spend time in nature, making nature part of your being, which just adds to the quality of life. So here you go. These are the main benefits from paying high taxes here in Sweden. You can definitely make your own decision if you think that is worth paying higher taxes here in Sweden because of what you get. I definitely leave that up to you. Thanks so much for watching till the end, and I hope I will see you in my next video. Until then, have a great day and stay safe. Hey do!